Hello and welcome to the Digital Insight, the technology and supply chain podcast that delivers valuable C-level perspective into the core issues surrounding business transformation and digital disruption. Each episode will bring you the most inspiring executive insights from those leading transformation strategies within the world's biggest and best-known companies. The Digital Insight. Disrupt, transform, evolve.
Welcome to the Digital Insight, the official podcast series for CPO Strategy and Interface magazines. Today, I welcome back Frank Vorrath, Executive Partner of Supply Chain at Gartner, for part 4 of a 6-part supply chain masterclass. In this episode, Frank explores the concept of organizational structures and talent development in order to support the next era of business growth. Frank, welcome back to the Digital Insight.
Yeah, thank you, and a great pleasure to be back.
No, absolutely. And today I believe then we're going to look at the idea of, or the concept of sort of organizational structures and talent development designed to support the next era of company business growth. So can you sort of just begin with, give me a bit of an overview as to this idea?
I will give you a few ideas about it. So if you really think about what companies are intended to do in terms of driving performance and profitability to impact shareholder value and to attract new investors, and they need to focus on a few things. And one of the things they have to focus on is making the best decisions for investments in working capital and fixed assets to generate the highest potential earnings, to create shareholder value while moving through uncertainty and managing ongoing business disruptions. So if you think about it now, where companies have been coming from to operate in the marketplace and base it on their foundational business capabilities in order to compete, that won't be enough in future. If you think about probably 63% of all companies over the next couple of years going through business model changes, redesign of business models, looking into the future basis of competitions. And that means they have to not only grow their or expand their current business capabilities to create sustainable performance and results, they have to continuously innovate, transform, and create new business capabilities to support these new business models. So if you think about that in 2 blocks, I often talk about companies need to perform while they transform. And it has to be somewhere balanced, and you need to incorporate also the factor of that speed is a competitive advantage. And when you think about speed, speed is how do you actually align your organization to be able to make decisions, but also in a way of how your structure is being designed, operated to execute faster than it is today. Because if you think about what customers expecting from organizations going forward is a couple of things, is convenience, but also the expectations are out there that businesses can respond to any kind of demands at any given point of time, which means you have to organize your organizations your organization in different ways than you did in the past. So that obviously triggers off actions in organizations. And if you think about how an organization is designed, an organization, and the whole purpose of an organization is to make decisions. Now, if you think about the decision making and the execution, not in isolation from each other, you have to organize and design an organization to be able to actually generate value for you as a business, as well as to respond to customer demands. So that's really what the concept when I spoke to you about earlier about the organizational structure and talent design of an organization to support the next era of the company's business growth and new business models.
No, absolutely. And one of the things, of course, you mentioned there is this is happening at times of uncertainty and business disruptions. And obviously, a transformation is an ongoing process. And I guess really you can't stand still and transform. You have to transform, but also continue to operate. And it's obviously a key thing you bring up obviously, in some of your work about the ability to perform and transform simultaneously. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and sort of the challenge in trying to be able to achieve that, but also the successes and the value it can generate while it's happening?
Yeah, there's always a challenge, and one of the challenges is really to be able to respond to the lead stakeholders of a business. And if you think about lead stakeholders, that could be your customers, could be the lead stakeholder in your business, or it could be your shareholder or your shareholders. That could be, or it could be your people. So they are sometimes the same, but sometimes also different expectations. And here's where the challenge comes. An organization is always under pressure from, especially when it's being a publicly listed company, to perform on the highest level. And that means in terms of providing high or the highest potential earnings, providing the highest potential on return on capital employed. So really to satisfy the shareholders in the business, because that shareholders are so important, because they're holding an important stake in the business. Now, if you think also about the sustainability effect on business continuity to perform under these new business models, there is a transformation needed, which means you're looking for investments. And the investments could be in your people, in the talent you need to have in your organization, because talent is a critical enabler for an organization to be successful in future, not only currently. You look into the change of roles in spaces like digitalization. That requires investments, or you're looking into emerging technologies as an enabler to accelerate, to create as I would call it, the next best practice frontier, which is linked again to create the value for your customer, and which is then fundamentally important for you as an organization, for your basis of competition, which means how do you compete in the marketplace, what service do you want to give to your customers, but also what corresponding cost and also working capital you need to deploy in your organization. Now, that is obviously always I would call in competition, which means you need to generate high performance results in order to transform, because that requires investments. Now also, if you think about you actually invest in building higher capabilities, you actually taking cash from your existing operations, or generated from your existing operations, to invest in building new capabilities in order to perform on a different level than you perform today, in order to give something back to the shareholder. So that's really what we talk when we talk about why sometimes it is challenging, because of organizations perhaps don't have, or being not in a position to reinvest in their business, and they need to fix their house first.
No, absolutely. And as we talk about business models and talk about this sort of transformation and different ways of working, of course, we're talking about people, and we're talking about the staff and the employees. How important then is it for businesses undergoing transformation such as this to invest and to spend time enabling employee engagement and talent management, and really sort of bringing everybody into the decisions to sort of create wider collaboration?
Absolutely. Talent or people that are the key enablers for companies to compete in the future. There is so much talk about technology, but in the end of the day, it's the people who are most important in an organization. And we all know about a shortage of people when it comes to certain functions within the supply chain. And companies who really understand um, and develop the talent they have, but also looking from the outside to consistently bring in new talent into the organizations are the winners in tomorrow's marketplaces. So I'm looking into that as well, where organizations also realize that the old structures of hierarchy doesn't work anymore, and they realize that structures perhaps need to change to increase empowerment and collaboration and innovation in an organization. So where you have typically hierarchy being organized, being around control and chain of command, about titles, about task, accountability focused, bureaucratic. That's typically that. I would say. You will see that structures and organization really looking into more like purpose-driven structures and networks and connected people within of connected networks and the roles they play in that networks and how they empower people, and looking into more the contribution and rewarding the contribution related to the purpose they have. And that's obviously a completely different structure than we will find today, where people are working on, analyzing things, but also resolving problems differently. When you think about using now technology as an enabler here in the relation between human being as well as machines, the decision making, but also the mobilization of not only people in a hierarchy, more like people in a network, and then everything being outcome focused. So hence, you see that organizations are shifting more to talent development programs. Formally, you see that you have companies using technologies which connect people through mentorships or focusing heavily on building talent academies, but also the concept of young emerging talents as a shadow board for companies becoming very, very, very popular. And the reason for that is really that organizations are really realizing that they need to empower their people more, because there's so much brain power in an organization lost because of old structures. Now, new structures need to empower that innovation and using the brain power together in a connected ecosystem.
No, absolutely. And one thing you mentioned there, of course, is the idea of a shadow board. Talk to me a little bit about what you mean by a shadow board and how this sort of, going back to the top of the discussion, better enables a business to perform and transform as it, seamlessly enters this new era of business.
Yeah, if you think about that, you have companies being set up from a governance point of view in certain ways, often also that they have a board of directors and they have a responsibility towards shareholders. Now, the whole idea and concept of a shadow board is that you give younger emerging talents in an organization the opportunity to present their ideas or even their observations to senior leadership, including board of directors. in a way of what would they do to run an organization differently? What have they observed? What do they come across? Now, if you think about that, we know that over the next 10 years, the financial performance of 25% of enterprises will be weakened because of competition that does not exist today. That's really where now senior leaders in an organization plus board of directors can use an opportunity to use millennials, but also, other generations, younger generations, to use their brain power in terms of raising the bar for competitiveness, or repositioning their organizations in the marketplace. So instead of having the traditional boards running an organization, there are companies out there who almost have shadow boards running in parallel, and then somewhere trying to connect that. Obviously, the decision making is still with the main board, but insights to the business, senior leadership, as well as board of directors, can come from shadow boards. So that's really what the concept is intended to do.
No, absolutely, and that makes perfect sense. And to take it back a few steps, you mentioned, previously about the idea of, sort of these structures that are defined with a sense of a hierarchy, and something you've spoken about before is the concept of dismantling this hierarchy and driving heterarchy. What does that do then in terms of, empowering employees, empowering decisions, but also just sort of driving engagement and again creating a sense of better collaboration?
Yeah, if you think about what I've mentioned before about an organization to be able to have a different speed, and speed of decision making, speed of responding to market changes, speed of tapping into market opportunities. So really to organize an organization, and when we talk about an organization, let's also talk about the extended ecosystem. You need to somewhere organize that differently, and able to actually respond to market needs and customer needs. Now, when you think about the agility which is required to do that, you think about purpose-driven and more networks, as instead of top-down and command and control, which means people in a network of networks, which means companies in a trading network or ecosystem. They're focusing on outcomes. They're focusing on what's the purpose of us together to accomplish. Now you think also that the decisions are more horizontal than vertical. You also think about empowerment horizontally than vertically. You also think about that the rewards or intrinsic rewards are structured to be supporting the purpose as well as the outcome you want to accomplish. So you incorporate that into your structure and make that real.
Something that we have spoken about in our previous episode has been the concept of role models, and obviously this kind of ties into that kind of greater collaboration. And I want to take that a little further and look at it from perspective of coaching and mentorship. Particularly when we talked about shadow board and this millennial generation and the next wave of talent and skill sets and capabilities that already exist within the business. How important is it then when looking at a new structure, to factor in a sense of mentoring, a sense of coaching, so that we are breeding and sort of developing these people so that when the time comes and they become the decision makers, they're more than prepared?
I believe that a couple of thoughts on that. I mean, the next wave of retirement for certain really professionals is just around the corner. So you also want to capture that expertise, experience, and knowledge before it actually walks out the door of your business. Now, if you can connect more experienced, more knowledgeable people with younger generation or younger generations of people in your organization, then you capture both. You capture innovation, which sometimes comes from younger generations because they are used to new technologies which are out there, and you capture experience and expertise at the same time. Now, when you can connect that and to a purpose of an organization, even better. Now, that often can be informal, but there is a better way of doing this formally, which means that can be a part of a formal talent development program where you have mentors playing a role, coaching talents in your organization from an experience and expertise point of view, in combination with the innovation which comes from younger talents in your organization. So there is a transfer of knowledge which can happen both sides. It's not one-sided, which means you still probably can perform better than you do today because you capture also the innovation part of that, as well as now before experience and expertise is leaving your business, you transfer that knowledge to the next generations of leaders in your organization. So that's really when we talk about these type of programs.
And what do you think makes for, again, sticking with this idea of these next generation, obviously while we're transforming and creating new or improved, so to speak, organizational structures, what do you think makes then and goes into making a workplace more attractive? So, you said right then, it's about keeping that talent before it goes out the door. So where does what does it mean to make it more attractive, to make it somewhere that people want to stay and want to progress and develop as the business grows?
First of all, I do believe what makes a workplace really attractive that people can understand what the true strategy and the purpose of that organization is. So really having a better understanding of the overall strategy, the goals, the objectives will really contribute well to creating that attractive workplace. Now, also people want to be empowered. They want to take more ownership and responsibility and accountability. So you need to create a structure which allows the freedom of people to take that ownership. They also want to have an understanding of long-term commitments. And long-term commitments of the business is not only from the sustainable business performance and results, is also from their commitment to sustainability, which means the environment, which becomes more and more important, and the commitment of an organization to the environment. That's key. What also makes an attractive workplace is removing barriers and having the ability of making decisions and faster decisions, creating an environment of innovation, but also creating an environment of freedom. And freedom is about the concept of work-life balance and the workplace as such, where it doesn't matter probably in future anymore if you work from an office or you work from somewhere else. It's all related to the business outcome you're trying to accomplish. And One important factor for creating an attractive workplace is really, we call that the social contracting, which means the social networks in organizations are very, very powerful, which means people are connected 24 hours. They can exchange information inside the organization, outside the organization, using social media platforms, etc. And now, if you can build on that, what younger generations like to do, and you can incorporate that into your own organization, creating a social media within your organization where people are connected through and can exchange in information, that becomes very, very attractive going forward.
One thing that I always like to ask, just because when we talk about transformation, particularly in this case, we're talking a lot about internal capabilities, stakeholder capabilities, but obviously you mentioned at the very beginning that the customer is a stakeholder. How important is it to maintain the customer at the center of everything that's happening, so that while transformation is happening, while efficiencies are being enabled and value and better bottom lines and capital is being spent more wisely, but how important is it to try and keep that customer at the heart of everything to ensure that the direction that you're heading in always is the right direction?
Yeah, I would say without customers, there's no business. Full stop. If you can't look after your customer in an appropriate manner, you won't have a business. That means that you have to consistently have the outside in view, and not only the inside out view, from the customer or the customer's eyes right back into your organization. How do you want to really meet the ever changing demands and expectations of customers going forward? And if you think about that from a customer point of view, that service is more important than ever. Convenience for customers are becoming more and more important than ever. You need to find ways how you can drive loyalty across your existing customer base, as well as potential new prospects. And that's a challenge for a business to do. Now, customers demand different things. They want to be informed differently. They want to have a transparent environment, constant feedback, updates. They want to being served differently, which means convenience I've spoken about. When you can reduce the stress factors for customers, when you think about the efforts customers have to make to interact with you as an organization. And when I talk about efforts, I mean two things. The physical efforts your customers have to make in the way of doing business with you, but also the cognitive effort you create for your customers by interacting with you as a business. When you think about cognitive efforts, think about the headaches or the migraine you actually create for your customers. So customers are very, very, very important. Without of customers, you want to have a business. You want to have the ability even to invest. There won't be any shareholders. There won't be any people, and there won't be any talent to be developed.
If you could offer one piece of advice to a business that is, at the very start of, what we've talked about today, that they're looking to reorganize their structure, they're looking at talent development, and they're readying themselves for that next era of company business growth. If you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would give the advice of when they make decisions, they need to make decisions for their investments, looking into their main stakeholders in the business always. How is that impacting my customers? How is that impacting my people? And how is it impacting my shareholders or potential new investors in the business? So make the best informed decisions around all your stakeholders in your business, and don't show preferences.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Insight Podcast in association with theinterface.net and cpostrategy.com. The Digital Insight is brought to you by B2E Media Limited. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review, and don't forget to check out our podcast archive at www.b2e-media.com/podcast.